The wine hit my shirt like a crimson declaration of war. "Oh my goodness, Orion. I'm so clumsy tonight," Felix Rourde announced to the entire ballroom, his voice carrying that practiced executive tone that fooled nobody with half a brain. The burgundy liquid spread across my white dress shirt like spilled secrets, and every eye in the room turned to witness my humiliation. I stood there, dripping Bordeaux that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, watching my wife Nola rush over with napkins. Her face wore that expression I'd grown to recognize, the one that said she was mortified to be associated with me in public. "Here, honey," she whispered, dabbing at the stain with the urgency of someone trying to clean up a crime scene. "Maybe you should go to the restroom and clean up." Translation: disappear so I don't have to explain why I married beneath my station. Felix stood there grinning, his perfectly veneered teeth catching the chandelier light. At 45, he had that artificial polish that comes from expensive grooming and inherited confidence. His hand rested possessively on the small of Nola's back as she fussed over my shirt. "Really sorry about that, Owen," he said, deliberately mangling my name. "These hotel floors can be so slippery." "It's Orion," I corrected, meeting his gaze. "And no worries. Accidents happen." But this was no accident. I'd been watching Felix Rourde for 3 months now, ever since I'd noticed the changes in my wife. The late nights at the advertising agency, the new perfume, the way she'd started pronouncing certain words with an affected precision that matched his corporate speak. The ballroom buzzed with the kind of energy that comes from watching someone else's embarrassment. Crystal glasses clinked, designer heels clicked against marble, and conversations resumed with that slightly elevated volume that meant everyone was talking about what they'd just witnessed. I excused myself and headed toward the restroom, but not for the reason Nola expected. 20 years as a journalist had taught me to observe, to collect details, to see the story beneath the surface. Tonight wasn't about celebrating Felix's promotion to regional CEO. Tonight was about establishing dominance. The men's room was empty, except for an elderly waiter refilling the towel dispensers. I recognized him, Sasha Martinez, an old friend from my boxing club days who'd been working hotel events to supplement his bartender income. "Saw what happened out there," Sasha said, shaking his head. "That guy's a real piece of work. You know Felix? Know of him? He's got a reputation among the staff, tips like he's doing you a favor, treats everyone like furniture." Sasha glanced toward the door, then lowered his voice. "Word is he's been bragging about some married woman he's been seeing. High-powered advertising executive, apparently." The pieces clicked into place with the satisfying precision of a well-oiled machine. I'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed felt like getting punched in the stomach by someone wearing brass knuckles made of truth. "Sasha, you still got that chemistry background from before you started bartending?" He raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, why? Remember those color-changing compounds we used to mess with in college? The harmless ones?" A slow grin spread across his weathered face. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" "I'm thinking Felix Rourde needs to learn that some stains don't wash out." 20 minutes later, I returned to the ballroom with a clean shirt borrowed from Hotel Lost and Found and a plan that would have made my journalism professors proud. Sasha had worked his magic in the service area, and now we waited. Nola stood near the bar with Felix, their body language telling a story that would have been obvious to anyone paying attention. She laughed at something he said, her hand briefly touching his arm in that casual, intimate way that couples develop. They looked comfortable together. Natural. More natural than she'd looked with me in years. "There he is," Felix announced as I approached, "all cleaned up and ready to rejoin civilization." "Thanks to the hotel's excellent facilities," I replied, accepting a fresh glass of wine from a passing waiter. "Though I have to say, Felix, you've got quite an arm on you. Ever consider a career in professional wine throwing?" A few nearby guests chuckled, and I saw something flicker behind Felix's eyes. He wasn't used to his targets fighting back with humor. Just clumsy, I guess, he said, taking a sip from his own glass. Sometimes I don't know my own strength. Oh, I think you know exactly what you're doing. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Nola's eyes darted nervously between her husband and her lover, probably wondering if I'd figured out their little secret. Felix raised his glass in a mock toast. Well then, here's to knowing exactly what we're doing. He tilted the glass back, and I watched with the satisfaction of a chess player executing a long-planned gambit. The wine hit his lips, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, as the liquid made contact with his saliva, the chemical reaction Sasha had engineered began its beautiful work. Felix's mouth turned a brilliant shade of purple. He tried to swallow discreetly, but the staining compound was already spreading. His lips, his teeth, even his tongue had taken on the color of grape popsicle. When he smiled, trying to maintain his composure, he looked like a vampire who'd been feeding on Kool-Aid. Felix, Nola whispered, her voice tight with mortification. Your mouth. The conversations around us began to die as people noticed. Someone giggled, then someone else. Within 30 seconds, half the ballroom was staring at Felix Rourde, the newly promoted CEO, who looked like he'd been making out with a marker. What the? Felix touched his lips, his fingers coming away purple. Oh my, I said, pulling out my phone. That's quite a look, Felix. Very avant-garde. Mind if I get a picture? This seems like the kind of moment that should be preserved for posterity. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. His face went red beneath the purple, creating a color combination that would have made a bruise jealous. You did this. Me? I'm just a clumsy journalist who can't even keep wine off his own shirt. How could I possibly orchestrate something this sophisticated? But even as I denied it, I was already planning the next move, because this was just the opening act. The DJ booth sat elevated at the far end of the ballroom like a command center overlooking the social battlefield. I'd noticed earlier that the young woman running it had been taking requests all night, playing a mix of corporate-friendly jazz and inoffensive pop that kept conversations flowing without overwhelming them. Felix had retreated to the men's room to deal with his purple mouth situation, leaving Nola standing alone near the bar. She kept glancing toward the restroom door, her champagne glass trembling slightly in her manicured fingers. The crowd had mostly returned to their conversations, but I caught the occasional pointed look and suppressed smile directed her way. Rough night? I asked, approaching my wife with the kind of concerned expression I'd perfected during 20 years of interviewing reluctant sources. Don't, she said quietly. Not here. Don't what? Express concern for my wife's obvious distress? Ask why the man she works for just publicly humiliated her husband? Nola's jaw tightened. At 39, she still had the sharp beauty that had first attracted me in college, but success had added an edge to her features that made her look perpetually dissatisfied. Tonight, that dissatisfaction was mixed with something that looked suspiciously like panic. Felix didn't mean anything by it. He gets nervous at these corporate events. Sometimes he overcompensates. By throwing wine on people? By trying too hard to be the center of attention. I nodded as if this explanation made perfect sense. And the purple mouth thing? Also nervous energy? Before she could answer, Felix emerged from the restroom. He'd managed to reduce the purple staining to a faint tint around his lips, but he still looked like he'd been taste-testing children's vitamins. His eyes found mine immediately, and the look he gave me could have stripped paint. Feeling better? I called out. He ignored me and made a beeline for the DJ booth. I watched him climb the steps and lean over to whisper something to the young woman running the music. She nodded and began fiddling with her equipment. Ladies and gentlemen, Felix's voice boomed through the sound system. If I could have your attention for just a moment. The conversations died as heads turned toward the booth. Felix stood there with a microphone, his purple-tinged smile looking more sinister than celebratory under the colored lights. As you know, tonight is about celebrating new beginnings and fresh opportunities. But sometimes to move forward, we need to acknowledge the past. His eyes locked onto mine. I thought you might enjoy seeing some behind-the-scenes footage from our industry, a little blooper reel, if you will. The large screens positioned around the ballroom flickered to life, and I felt a cold recognition settle in my chest. This was footage from the newspaper's holiday party 3 years ago, back when I still had a steady job and hadn't yet been forced into freelance work. I remembered that night, remembered drinking too much, remembered making a fool of myself trying to impress some advertisers who might throw work my way. But as the video began to play, I realized something was wrong. The footage showed me all right, but the audio didn't match. Instead of my awkward attempts at networking, the soundtrack featured what sounded like me making inappropriate comments about women at the party, including several crude observations about my own wife. The crowd began to murmur. I heard someone gasp. Nola stepped away from me, her face flushing with embarrassment. "That's not," I started to say, but Felix's voice cut through the room again. "Now, I'm not one to judge," he said into the microphone. "We've all had too much to drink and said things we regret. But I think it's important to know who we're dealing with." The doctored video continued, showing me apparently making lewd gestures while the fake audio track had me describing various women's bodies in terms that would have made a construction worker blush. It was masterfully edited, perfectly synced, and completely fabricated. But I was smiling. Because 3 months ago, when I'd first started suspecting my wife's infidelity, I'd done what any good journalist would do. I'd started gathering evidence. And part of that evidence collection had involved some creative preparation for exactly this kind of situation. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Sasha, who I knew was monitoring the hotel's AV system from the service area. The message was simple: now. The screens flickered, and Felix's triumphant expression began to falter as he realized something was wrong. The video of me disappeared, replaced by new footage that I'd been saving for exactly the right moment. The first clip showed Nola at the agency's Christmas party, drunk and flirting outrageously with 3 different men while I was home with the flu. The second showed Felix in his office, screaming at an assistant and throwing papers around like a toddler having a tantrum. The third was the crown jewel. Security footage from the hotel's parking garage, time-stamped from 2 weeks ago, showing Felix and Nola in what could generously be described as a passionate embrace against the side of his BMW. The ballroom went silent except for the sound of champagne glasses being set down on tables. "Well," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet, "I guess we're all sharing our home movies tonight." Felix fumbled with the microphone, trying to cut the feed, but Sasha had locked him out of the system. The footage continued, showing more clips of their affair, including some particularly damning audio of them mocking me during what appeared to be a romantic dinner. "Turn it off," Nola hissed, but there was nowhere to run. Every screen in the room displayed her betrayal in high definition. I walked calmly to the center of the ballroom, every eye following my movement. When I spoke, my voice was steady and clear. "You know, Felix, you're absolutely right. Sometimes we do need to acknowledge the past to move forward, and sometimes we need to acknowledge the present too." My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter Mara. "Dad, what's happening? People are sending me videos from Mom's party." I typed back quickly, "Just some truth coming to light, honey. Nothing for you to worry about." But that wasn't entirely accurate, because this was just the beginning. The parking garage beneath the hotel felt like a concrete tomb at midnight. Most of the party guests had fled after the video revelation, leaving behind a scattered collection of luxury cars and the lingering scent of expensive perfume mixed with automotive exhaust. I'd followed Felix and Nola down here, maintaining enough distance to avoid detection while staying close enough to hear their heated conversation echoing off the concrete walls. "How did he get that footage?" Felix demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "That was supposed to be erased from the security system." "I don't know," Nola replied, her heels clicking nervously against the floor. "Maybe he has contacts at the hotel." "Your husband is a washed-up journalist who can barely afford his car payments. He doesn't have contacts anywhere." I crouched behind a concrete pillar, my phone recording their conversation, while I attached the GPS tracking device I'd purchased online to the underside of Felix's BMW. 20 years of investigative work had taught me the value of preparation and patience. "We need to do damage control," Nola said. "The board is going to hear about this. Your wife is going to hear about this." "My wife already knows I'm having an affair," Felix snapped. "She just doesn't know it's with you specifically. And she's not going to find out, because we're going to make sure your pathetic husband never opens his mouth again." I felt a chill run through me that had nothing to do with the underground temperature. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. They were planning something more serious. "What do you mean?" Nola asked. "I mean, we're going to destroy him completely, his reputation, his career, his relationship with your daughter. By the time we're done, Orion Vanton will be a cautionary tale." They climbed into Felix's car and drove away, leaving me alone in the garage with a recording that would have made any prosecutor salivate and a growing understanding that I'd underestimated my opponents. I walked to my own car, a 10-year-old Honda that looked embarrassed to be parked among the luxury vehicles, and sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, thinking. The GPS tracker would let me monitor Felix's movements, but I needed more than that. I needed to understand their plan before they could execute it. My phone rang. "Mara." "Dad? I've been seeing these videos online. Is it true about Mom and her boss?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of having to explain adult failures to my 20-year-old daughter. "It's complicated, sweetheart." "It didn't look complicated. It looked like Mom was cheating on you." "Where are you right now?" "In my dorm." "Dad, are you okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine. Listen, your mom might try to contact you in the next few days. She might ask you to help her with something, or ask you questions about me." "What kind of questions?" "I don't know yet. But if she does, I need you to be careful about what you tell her. Can you do that for me?" There was a long pause. "Dad, you're scaring me." "I don't mean to, Things are going to get complicated for a while, and I want to make sure you're protected from the worst of it." After I hung up, I drove home to the suburban house that Nola and I had bought during better times. It was a modest place by her current standards, but it had been our dream home once upon a time. Now it felt like a museum of a marriage that had died while I wasn't paying attention. I went straight to my home office and opened the file I'd been building for 3 months. Photos, credit card statements, phone records, emails I'd recovered from our shared computer. The evidence of Nola's affair was overwhelming, but I'd also discovered something else. She'd been systematically draining our joint accounts and transferring the money to a private account I wasn't supposed to know about. She was planning to leave me, had been planning it for months. But first, she and Felix were going to try to destroy me. I spent the next 2 hours researching Felix Rourde's background using the investigative skills that had once made me a decent journalist. What I found was fascinating. 3 previous jobs, all ending with mysterious departures. 2 harassment complaints that had been settled out of court. A pattern of targeting married women in subordinate positions. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." I smiled and typed back, "Try me." Within minutes, my phone rang. "Felix." "You think you're clever," he said without preamble. "I think I'm thorough. There's a difference." "What do you want?" "I want you to leave my wife alone." Felix laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your wife came to me, remember? She's the one who wanted out of your pathetic little life." Then let her go. Cleanly. No games, no destruction. Where's the fun in that? The line went quiet for a moment, and I could hear him breathing. Here's what's going to happen, he finally said. Tomorrow morning, you're going to receive some very disturbing information about your wife's plans for your marriage. Information that will make you look like an unstable, potentially dangerous husband. By the time we're done, no one will believe anything you say about us. And if I don't play along, then things get much worse for everyone involved, including your daughter. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I thought about Mara, innocent and trusting, caught between her parents' war. You're making a mistake, Felix. No, he said. You made the mistake when you decided to mess with people who have more power than you do. After he hung up, I sat in my office staring at the evidence I'd collected, understanding that the game had just changed completely. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about survival, and I was going to need help. The Roosevelt Boxing Club occupied a converted warehouse in the part of town that gentrification hadn't reached yet. The building smelled like sweat, leather, and decades of honest work, a sharp contrast to the sanitized corporate environments where my wife and her lover conducted their business. Sasha was working the heavy bag when I arrived, his movements still sharp despite being on the wrong side of 50. He'd been a chemistry teacher before budget cuts eliminated his position, and now he cobbled together income from bartending, hotel catering, and training fighters who couldn't afford the fancy gyms uptown. Saw the news coverage of last night, he said, without stopping his workout. Local blogger called it the most entertaining corporate party in years. It's going to get worse before it gets better. He stopped hitting the bag and turned to face me, reading something in my expression that made him serious. How much worse? I told him about the parking garage conversation, about Felix's threats, about the systematic way they were planning to destroy my reputation. Sasha listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing more concerned as the story progressed. So, what do you need? He asked when I finished. I need someone I can trust, someone who knows how to stay invisible and gather information, and someone who has access to hotel security systems and catering events where rich people say stupid things. That too. Sasha wrapped his hands and started working the speed bag, the rhythmic pounding providing a soundtrack for our conversation. You know this could get dangerous. These aren't people who play fair. I know. That's why I'm asking for help instead of trying to handle it alone. What about your daughter? She's the reason I can't just walk away. If I let them destroy me, they'll poison her against me forever. Felix already threatened to involve her somehow. The speed bag stopped moving. Sasha's expression went cold in a way that reminded me he'd grown up in neighborhoods where people settled disputes with more than lawyers and social media. Nobody threatens kids. That crosses a line. So you'll help? I'll help. But we do this smart. No unnecessary risks, no permanent damage to anyone. We're not criminals. Agreed. We spent the next hour planning. Sasha had worked enough corporate events to understand how the social ecosystem functioned. He knew which hotel employees could be trusted, which security guards could be convinced to look the other way, and which caterers had access to private conversations. More importantly, he understood chemistry. If they're planning to frame you for something, he said, they'll need evidence. Fake evidence, probably, but it has to look real. That means they'll be meeting somewhere to coordinate their story. The GPS tracker will tell us where Felix goes, but I need to know what they're planning specifically. Leave that to me. I'm catering a private dinner tomorrow night at the Meridian Gallery. Guess who's on the guest list? I felt a surge of hope for the first time in days. Felix and Nola? Along with several board members from the advertising agency. Apparently it's a crisis management dinner to discuss the fallout from last night. Can you get me inside? Better. I can get you hired as additional staff. You'll be invisible and you'll hear everything they say. My phone buzzed with a text from Nola. We need to talk. Meet me at home at 7. I showed the message to Sasha, who frowned. That's either an olive branch or a trap. Only one way to find out. Be careful, and keep your phone recording. I left the boxing club feeling like I had a fighting chance for the first time since this whole mess started. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something much more dangerous than a simple confrontation with my cheating wife. The house was dark when I arrived, but Nola's car was in the driveway. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch we'd picked out together 10 years ago when we still believed we were building something permanent. She looked older than she had the night before, as if the stress of exposure had aged her overnight. Her makeup was perfect, but I could see the exhaustion beneath it. Orion, we need to talk about what happens next. I'm listening. She took a deep breath, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, human. I want a divorce. I figured that much out. I want it to be amicable, for Mara's sake. I sat down across from her, maintaining enough distance to avoid any appearance of intimacy or threat. What does amicable mean to you? It means we divide things fairly, and we don't try to destroy each other in the process. The way you and Felix destroyed me last night? Her composure cracked slightly. That wasn't supposed to happen that way. Felix got angry about the wine thing and overreacted. By showing doctored video footage of me to a room full of people? The video wasn't doctored, Orion. It was real. I stared at her, genuinely shocked. You actually believe that? I was there that night. I saw how you acted. Then you saw something different than what actually happened, because that audio was completely fabricated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Felix wouldn't. He said you'd recorded those comments yourself, as some kind of joke. Felix lied to you, Nola, just like he's been lying to his wife, and just like he'll lie to the next woman he manipulates. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. You're trying to turn me against him. I'm trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life. My biggest mistake was staying in this marriage as long as I did. The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my voice steady. When did you decide that? Years ago, maybe from the beginning. I don't know anymore. But you decided to handle it by having an affair and planning to frame me for harassment? She spun around, her eyes wide. What are you talking about? I heard you and Felix in the parking garage last night. I know what you're planning. The color drained from her face. You were spying on us? I was protecting myself. Good thing, too, considering what I learned. Nola sank back onto the couch, her hands shaking. You don't understand. Felix said, he said you were dangerous, that you might try to hurt me if you found out about us. And you believed him? I didn't know what to believe. You've been so angry lately, so distant. I've been distant because I knew something was wrong. I've been angry because my wife was lying to me. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 20 years of marriage settling between us like dust on abandoned furniture. It doesn't matter now, she finally said. It's too late to fix this. Maybe, but it's not too late to end it honestly. She looked at me with something that might have been regret. Felix won't let it end quietly. He says you're a threat to his career now. Then Felix is going to learn what an actual threat looks like. The Meridian Gallery occupied a converted warehouse in the Arts District, its exposed brick walls and industrial lighting creating the kind of atmosphere that made mediocre art look profound and overpriced wine taste sophisticated. I arrived at 5:30, wearing the black pants and white shirt that marked me as catering staff, invisible to the wealthy patrons who would soon fill the space. Sasha had briefed me on the evening's plan during a quick meeting in the gallery's service kitchen. The dinner was officially a celebration of local artists, but the real purpose was damage control. Felix needed to reassure the advertising agency's board members that the previous night's scandal wouldn't affect business, while simultaneously building the narrative that would justify whatever they planned to do to me. Table 6 is where the real conversation will happen, Sasha explained, handing me a serving tray. Felix, Nola, and 3 board members. I've set up a recording device in the centerpiece, but you'll need to get close enough to activate it. What about security cameras? Disabled in that section. Officially, it's a lighting issue, but I know the security chief. He owes me a favor. I spent the first hour of the event serving appetizers and wine, learning the rhythm of the space and identifying the key players. Felix arrived fashionably late, his purple-stained lips now completely normal, but his demeanor radiating the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from having a plan. Nola entered with him, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked stunning and miserable, like a movie star attending her own funeral. The board members were exactly what I'd expected. 3 middle-aged executives who'd built their careers on risk management and strategic positioning. They greeted Felix with the kind of professional warmth that could freeze over in seconds if the quarterly numbers went south. I moved through the gallery, refilling wine glasses and clearing plates while listening to fragments of conversation. The official dinner discussion focused on market trends and client relationships, but I caught enough sidebar comments to understand that everyone was nervous about the previous night's exposure. At 8:30, the main dinner service ended and most of the guests moved to the gallery's exhibition area for coffee and networking. Felix's group remained at table 6, and I saw him gesture for privacy. The other waitstaff moved away, leaving me as the only server in their section. I approached with a wine bottle, activating the recording device as I refilled Felix's glass. "The situation is contained," Felix was saying to the board members. "Last night was embarrassing, but it's not going to affect our client relationships or our market position." "What about the husband?" asked Margaret Chen, the agency's head of client relations. "He seems to have more resources than we initially assumed." "Orion Vanton is a failed journalist with a drinking problem and a history of inappropriate behavior toward women," Felix replied smoothly. "Any claims he makes about me or about Nola will be seen in that context." I nearly dropped the wine bottle. The narrative was even more sophisticated than I'd expected. "You have documentation of this behavior?" asked Robert Kim, the agency's legal counsel. "We're developing it. Nola has been keeping detailed records of his increasingly erratic conduct over the past several months. Threatening behavior, financial irresponsibility, emotional manipulation of their daughter." Nola shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but didn't contradict him. "What kind of threatening behavior?" Margaret asked. "Stalking, mostly. Following Nola to work, monitoring her communications, making veiled threats about what he'll do if she tries to leave him." "That's not," Nola started to say, then stopped herself. "Not what?" Felix asked, his voice carrying a subtle warning. "Not something we should discuss in detail here," she finished weakly. I continued serving wine, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. They weren't just planning to destroy my reputation, they were creating a narrative that would make me look like a potential domestic abuser. "The restraining order will be filed Monday morning," Felix continued, "along with a formal complaint to the police about his harassment and stalking behavior." "Will that be enough?" Robert asked. "It'll be enough to discredit anything he says about us, and if he violates the restraining order, which men like him usually do, he'll face criminal charges." Margaret nodded approvingly. "What about the daughter? She could be a complication if she supports her father's version of events." "Mara is a college student who depends on her mother for financial support," Felix replied. "She'll come around once she understands the situation." I felt something cold and dangerous settle in my chest. They weren't just targeting me. They were planning to isolate me from my own daughter. "There is one other issue," Nola said quietly. "Orion has been collecting evidence. Photos, financial records, recordings. If he releases more information—" "He won't," Felix said firmly. Because if he does, we'll have him arrested for stalking and harassment. The evidence he's collected will actually support our case that he's been monitoring and threatening you. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, covering details about restraining orders, police reports, and media management. By the time they finished, they'd constructed a complete false narrative that would destroy my credibility and potentially land me in jail. I retreated to the service kitchen, my mind racing through the implications of what I'd heard. Sasha found me there, reading my expression immediately. That bad? Worse. They're not just planning to discredit me, they're planning to have me arrested. I told him everything I'd overheard, watching his face grow darker with each detail. We need to move faster than planned, he said. If they file that restraining order Monday, you'll be fighting from a position of weakness. What do you suggest? We accelerate the timeline. Instead of waiting for them to make their move, we make ours first. What kind of move? Sasha smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. The kind that turns their own plan against them. He explained his idea, and I felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. It was risky, potentially illegal, and absolutely necessary. Are you sure about this? I asked. I'm sure that good people don't let bullies win, and I'm sure that threatening someone's kid crosses every line that matters. We spent the next hour finalizing the details, while the gallery event wound down around us. By the time the last guest left, we had a plan that would either save my life or destroy it completely. There was no middle ground left. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood as I sat in my car across the street from Felix's penthouse building. The GPS tracker had shown him returning home at 2 a.m. after the gallery dinner, and he hadn't left since. According to his social media posts, he was spending a quiet Sunday preparing for what he called an important week ahead. He had no idea how important it was about to become. My phone buzzed with a text from Mara. Dad, Mom wants me to come home this afternoon to talk about something important. She sounds really upset. What's going on? I typed back, Don't come home today, sweetheart. I'll explain everything soon, but right now I need you to stay at school. You're scaring me again. I know, and I'm sorry. Just trust me for a few more days, okay? I hated involving my daughter in this mess, even peripherally, but Felix had made it clear that she was already a target. The best way to protect her was to end this quickly and decisively. Sasha arrived at noon, driving a catering van that would give us legitimate access to Felix's building. The doorman knew him from previous events and waved us through without checking our identification. Penthouse level, I said, as we entered the elevator with our equipment. You sure he's alone? His wife is in Miami visiting her sister. Social media confirms it. The elevator opened directly into Felix's apartment, a monument to expensive taste and complete lack of personality. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while minimalist furniture created the impression of a high-end hotel rather than someone's home. Felix emerged from what appeared to be a home office, wearing casual clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. His expression shifted from confusion to anger as he recognized me. What the hell are you doing in my apartment? Catering delivery, Sasha said cheerfully, wheeling in a cart loaded with equipment. Someone ordered a very special meal. I didn't order anything. Get out before I call security. Go ahead and call, I said, pulling out my phone. While you're at it, maybe you can explain this. I played the recording from the gallery dinner, watching Felix's face go through several interesting color changes as he heard his own voice describing the false harassment case they were planning to build against me. That's illegal surveillance, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, it's not. I was working as legitimate catering staff at a public event. No expectation of privacy. Sasha continued setting up equipment while Felix and I talked, transforming the penthouse's main living area into something resembling a television studio. What do you want? Felix asked. I want you to tell the truth, on camera, about the affair, about the false harassment claims, about your plan to destroy my relationship with my daughter. And if I refuse? I smiled, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in days. Then I release everything I've collected to your wife, your board of directors, and the local media, plus a few additional items that Sasha helped me acquire. What additional items? Sasha looked up from his camera setup. Financial records showing how you've been embezzling from the agency's client accounts to pay for your affair. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, all charged to fake business expenses. Felix's face went white. That's impossible. Those records are encrypted. Encryption is just chemistry for computers, Sasha replied. And I'm very good at chemistry. I watched Felix process the implications, seeing the exact moment when he realized how completely trapped he was. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely defeated. What do you want me to say? The truth. All of it. We spent the next 2 hours recording Felix's confession. He admitted to the affair, to doctoring the video footage from my newspaper's holiday party, to planning the false harassment charges, and to embezzling agency funds. More importantly, he admitted that Nola had been manipulated into participating in his schemes. She didn't know about the financial crimes, he said, looking directly into the camera. And she was genuinely afraid of her husband because I convinced her he was dangerous. I needed her cooperation, so I made her believe she was in physical danger. Why? I asked. Because destroying you was easier than competing with you. Even failing, you were a better man than I'll ever be, and she was starting to figure that out. When we finished recording, Felix looked like he'd aged 10 years. He sat in his expensive chair, staring out at the city view, probably calculating how much of his life was about to disappear. What happens now? He asked. Now you resign from the agency, you confess to your wife, and you leave my family alone forever. And if I do all that, then the financial crimes stay between us, and your confession doesn't get released to the media. Felix nodded slowly. And Nola? Nola gets to decide her own future without being manipulated by either of us. As Sasha packed up the equipment, my phone rang. Nola. Orion, where are you? We need to talk immediately. I'm busy right now. Felix called me this morning. He said you were planning to do something terrible. He said I needed to file the restraining order today instead of waiting until Monday. I looked at Felix, who had the grace to look ashamed. Felix says a lot of things, Nola. Most of them are lies. He's trying to protect me. He's trying to protect himself, but you'll figure that out soon enough. After I hung up, Felix cleared his throat. She really does love you, you know. Underneath all the mess I created, she still loves you. Maybe. But love isn't enough if there's no trust left. Will you give her a chance to earn it back? I considered the question as we rode the elevator down to the parking garage. 3 days ago, I would have done anything to save my marriage. Now, I wasn't sure there was anything left worth saving, but I was sure about one thing. The war was over, and for the first time in months, I'd won something that mattered. My family was safe, my reputation was intact, and Felix Rourde would never threaten anyone I cared about again. The rest, I'd figure out as I went along.